The stagecoach rattled into Leadville, Colorado on a blistering afternoon in July of 1883, carrying a woman who had already lived more life than most folks would manage in twice her years. And Adelaide Jane Morrison knew that this dusty mining town represented her last chance at something resembling hope. She stepped down from the coach with practiced grace, her 34 years worn like a well-fitted glove rather than a burden, her dark auburn hair pinned beneath a sensible hat, her green eyes taking in the rough wooden buildings and muddy streets with the measured assessment of someone who had learned long ago not to expect miracles. The younger women who had traveled with her, girls really, barely 20, giggled nervously as they clutched their own letters from prospective husbands. But Adelaide felt only a calm resignation mixed with something that might have been curiosity. The man who was supposed to meet her stood apart from the small crowd gathered at the station. Adelaide spotted him immediately because he kept glancing at a photograph in his hand, and then looking at the women descending from the coach with an expression that managed to be both hopeful and terrified. He was young, she realized with a sinking feeling, very young, perhaps 23 at most, with sun-streaked brown hair that needed cutting and the kind of lean, rangy build that came from hard physical labor rather than natural inclination. When their eyes met, his face went through a remarkable transformation, confusion giving way to something like disappointment, before settling into a determined politeness that made Adelaide's heart sink even further. This was Rowan Sterling, the man whose advertisement she had answered with complete honesty about her age, her past, her circumstances. The man who had written back that he did not care about such things, that he needed a wife who understood life's hardships and could be a true partner. She had believed those words because she had wanted to, needed to, but now looking at his young face, she wondered if he had truly understood what he was asking for. "Miss Morrison." His voice was deeper than she expected, rough around the edges but not unpleasant. "Mr. Sterling." She extended her hand, and he shook it with the kind of careful formality that spoke of recent practice. "I appreciate you meeting me. I said I would." He picked up her two modest bags as if they weighed nothing, which they nearly did given how little she owned. "The wagon is just over here. It is about an hour's ride to the ranch." They walked in silence through the bustling streets of Leadville, past saloons already loud with evening revelry, past the assayer's office where men lined up with bags of ore hoping to strike it rich, past the general store and the church and all the other buildings that marked a town trying to become civilized in the midst of wilderness. Adelaide had seen it all before in a dozen different towns, each one thinking itself unique, each one built on the same desperate dreams. The wagon was old but well maintained, and Rowan helped her up with a courtesy that seemed genuine despite his obvious discomfort. As they pulled away from town, heading into the rolling hills that surrounded Leadville, Adelaide decided to address the situation directly because she had learned that avoiding uncomfortable truths only made them fester. "You are disappointed," she said, not as a question. Rowan's hands tightened on the reins, and for a long moment she thought he might deny it. Then he sighed, and some of the rigid formality left his shoulders. "I am sorry, madam. That is not fair to you. I suppose I did not fully picture what the age difference would mean." "You are 23. Again, not a question. 24 in September, and you are 34 as you wrote in your letter." He glanced at her and she saw something shift in his expression. "You look younger than I expected, truth be told. That is not what concerns me." "Then what does?" He was quiet for so long that Adelaide thought he might not answer. The wagon rumbled along the dirt road, climbing gradually into country that was beautiful in its starkness, all golden grass and dark pine and mountains rising in the distance. Finally, Rowan spoke, his voice so low she had to lean closer to hear him. I have no idea what I am doing with any of this. The ranch, life, marriage. My father died 2 years ago, left me this land and these cattle and debts I am still working to pay off. I am failing at it, Miss Morrison. Slowly but surely failing. And I thought if I found a wife who had lived enough to understand how the world works, maybe she could help me figure it out. Maybe she could teach me. He laughed, but it was a bitter sound. But now you are here, a real person, and I realize how unfair that is, how much I am asking. Adelaide sat back, genuinely surprised. She had expected many things, but not honesty this raw, not vulnerability this immediate. You want me to teach you about everything. Running a household, managing money, dealing with people. He paused, and even in profile she could see the color rising in his cheeks. About love, if I am being completely truthful, I have never, there has not been anyone. No time, no opportunity, and now I have a wife coming and I do not even know how to talk to a woman properly. Something in Adelaide's chest loosened, a knot she had not even realized she was carrying. This was not rejection, not really. This was fear, and fear she understood, fear she could work with. Did you read my letters, Rowan? All of them? Yes, madam. Then you know I was married before, that my husband died of cholera 5 years ago, that I have been working as a seamstress, barely making enough to eat, that I have no illusions about romance or grand passion. She kept her voice steady, factual. You know that I answered your advertisement because I am practical enough to recognize a fair offer when I see one. A home, security, honest work. That is more than I have had in a long time. That sounds like a business arrangement, not a marriage. Most marriages are business arrangements, whether people admit it or not. The difference is that we are both being honest about it from the start. She turned to look at him directly. You say you want me to teach you. I can do that, Rowan Sterling, but only if you are willing to learn, and only if you understand that teaching goes both ways. I may be older, but I do not know anything about ranching or this territory or your life. We would have to learn from each other. He pulled the wagon to a stop, right there in the middle of the road, and turned to face her fully for the first time. His eyes were brown, she noticed, warm brown like polished wood, and they studied her face with an intensity that made her aware of every line, every mark left by the years. But there was no judgment in his gaze, only a careful consideration that suggested he was truly thinking about her words. I can agree to that, he said finally. Learning from each other, being honest, trying to make this work. He extended his hand again, and this time when Adelaide took it, it felt like sealing a real agreement, not just a polite greeting. I should tell you, Miss Morrison, that I am afraid I will disappoint you, that I am not ready to be a husband. I should tell you, Mr. Sterling, that I am afraid I am too tired to be the teacher you need, that I have forgotten how to hope for anything better. Adelaide squeezed his hand once before releasing it. But perhaps fear is not the worst place to start. At least it means we both care about getting it right. The ranch, when they finally reached it as the sun was painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, was smaller than Adelaide had pictured, but not unpleasant. The house was a simple wooden structure, 2 stories, in need of paint but structurally sound. A barn stood nearby, along with several outbuildings and a corral where a handful of horses watched their arrival with mild interest. Beyond that, she could see cattle grazing in the distance, dark shapes against the golden grass. It is not much, Rowan said as he helped her down from the wagon. But the land is good and the water rights are secure. If I can just make it through this season with a decent calf crop, I can start getting ahead instead of just holding even. Show me the house. Inside, Adelaide found exactly what she expected from a young man living alone. The rooms were clean enough but barren, functional furniture arranged without any thought to comfort or aesthetics, dishes washed but stacked haphazardly, floors swept but not scrubbed. It was a place where someone existed but did not quite live. "I have been sleeping upstairs," Rowan said, carrying her bags into the small parlor. "There is another bedroom up there, and I prepared it for you. I figured we would take things slowly, given everything." His ears were red now, and Adelaide took pity on him. "That is very thoughtful. I would appreciate having my own space initially." She removed her hat and gloves, setting them carefully on the rough wooden table. "Are you hungry? When did you last eat? This morning, I suppose. I was too nervous to eat in town." "Then let me see what you have in your kitchen, and I will make us both some supper. You can tell me about the ranch, the work that needs doing, the neighbors, everything I should know." She moved toward the kitchen before adding over her shoulder, "And Rowan, you can call me Adelaide. If we are going to be married, we should probably use our given names." "Adelaide," he repeated, testing the sound of it. "Then you should call me Rowan, not Mr. Sterling." The kitchen was better stocked than she had anticipated, with flour and beans and salt pork, potatoes in a bin and eggs in a bowl, even some decent coffee. Adelaide worked efficiently, building up the fire in the stove and starting a simple meal while Rowan sat at the table and talked, his words coming faster as he relaxed, telling her about the cattle and the hands he could not afford to hire, and the neighbor to the north who kept trying to buy his land and the banker in town who was patient but not infinitely so. She listened, really listened, filing away information and starting to form a picture of the situation. It was not good, but it was not hopeless either, which put it ahead of where she had been a week ago. And there was something appealing about Rowan's earnestness, the way he spoke about the ranch not as a burden but as something he genuinely wanted to make work. "Your father must have loved this place," she said as she set plates of food on the table. "Nothing fancy but hot and filling." "He did. He came out here after the war, saved every penny for years to buy this land. He always said it was his piece of peace, his corner of the world where he could forget what he had seen back east." Rowan looked down at his plate, and Adelaide saw grief flash across his young face. "He died before he could really make it profitable. Heart just gave out one day while he was mending fence. I found him at sunset." "I am sorry. That must have been very difficult." "It was. It still is some days." He started eating and Adelaide joined him, and for a few minutes, there was just the comfortable sound of silverware on plates. Then Rowan looked up at her with those serious brown eyes and asked, "What was your husband like? If you do not mind talking about it." Adelaide considered the question, surprised to find that it did not hurt as much as it once had. "Thomas was a good man, steady and kind. We married when I was 26, which people thought was scandalously late, but I had been caring for my sick mother and there was no time for courtship. He was 42, a clerk with a dry goods company. We had 8 years together. They were not exciting years, but they were peaceful, and after my childhood, I valued that peace more than excitement." "What happened to him?" "Cholera outbreak in St. Louis. He died along with hundreds of others. I survived, obviously, but I lost everything else. The job, the apartment, the little savings we had built up. I have been drifting since then, taking work where I can find it, moving from town to town." She met his eyes directly. "That is why I answered your advertisement, Rowan. Not because I was looking for love or romance, but because I was tired of drifting. I want a home again, even if it comes with hard work and uncertainty." "You will have that here," he said quietly. "I promise you that much at least. A home." They finished eating and cleaned up together. An awkward dance around the small kitchen as they negotiated space and learned each other's rhythms. Adelaide found herself oddly aware of Rowan's physical presence, the way he moved with unconscious grace despite his size, the way his hands looked both capable and gentle as he dried the dishes she washed. He was young, yes, but there was something in him that suggested he would grow into a remarkable man, given time and the right circumstances. That night, lying in the narrow bed in the room Rowan had prepared for her, Adelaide stared at the ceiling and wondered what she had gotten herself into. From downstairs, she could hear him moving around, the creak of floorboards, the sound of the door opening and closing as he went out for a final check on the animals. He was being so careful, so respectful, giving her space and time, but she knew they could not exist in this careful dance forever. Eventually, they would have to figure out what their marriage would actually mean. The question was whether she had the courage to be vulnerable again, to risk caring about someone and something when she had worked so hard to protect herself from disappointment. Morning came early in the form of a rooster crowing and the sound of Rowan moving around downstairs. Adelaide dressed quickly in one of her practical work dresses and came down to find him in the kitchen, looking confused at the coffee pot. "Let me," she said, taking over before he could protest. "You go do whatever morning chores need doing. I will have breakfast ready when you come back." He looked relieved and grateful in equal measure. "Thank you, Adelaide. I usually just grab something quick, but a real breakfast sounds wonderful." While he was gone, Adelaide took stock of the kitchen properly, making mental lists of what they had and what they needed. She was scrambling eggs when Rowan returned, bringing with him the smell of horses and hay and morning air. "We need to go into town today," she said as they ate. "I need proper supplies if I am going to keep house, and we should probably talk to the pastor about the wedding." Rowan nodded, though she noticed he looked nervous again. "About that, how soon were you thinking?" "I was thinking today, if possible." At his startled expression, she continued, "We are living in the same house, Rowan. People in town may be somewhat understanding given the circumstances, but not for long. Better to make it official and avoid any scandal that might make things harder for you." "That makes sense. I want you to be sure. This is not something you can take back easily." Adelaide set down her fork and looked at him steadily. "I have been sure of very little in my life, but I am sure of this. I need a home, you need a partner. We have both been honest about our situations and our expectations. That is more foundation than most marriages start with." "All right, then." He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders like a man preparing for battle. "We will go into town, see the pastor, and get married today if he will do it." The ride back to Leadville was quieter than the previous day's journey, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Adelaide found herself studying Rowan from the corner of her eye, this young man who would be her husband by day's end, if all went according to plan. He had a good profile, strong and honest, and there was something about the set of his jaw that suggested determination. She could do worse, she reminded herself. She had seen enough of the world to know that much was true. Pastor Reynolds was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a practical manner that Adelaide appreciated immediately. When they explained their situation, he nodded without judgment and agreed to perform the ceremony that afternoon, provided they could find 2 witnesses. "I assume you have been honest with Miss Morrison about your circumstances, Rowan?" the pastor asked. "Yes, sir. She knows about the debts and the struggles. She knows everything." "And you, Miss Morrison? You are entering this marriage of your own free will, with a clear understanding of what you are agreeing to." "I am, Pastor Reynolds. Mr. Sterling and I have been very honest with each other." "Then I see no reason to delay. Shall we say 4 o'clock? That will give you time to file the paperwork at the courthouse and find your witnesses." They spent the next few hours taking care of practical matters. Adelaide bought supplies for the kitchen, amazed at how far Rowan's money stretched when spent carefully. She also purchased fabric for new curtains and some small items to make the house more comfortable. Things Rowan would never have thought of but accepted without complaint. They filed their marriage license, with Rowan signing his name in a careful hand and Adelaide adding hers beneath it. For witnesses, they enlisted the help of the general store owner, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Patterson who seemed genuinely happy for them, and the banker, a shrewd man named Miller who looked at Adelaide with assessing eyes before nodding as if satisfied by what he saw. "Glad to see you settling down, Rowan," Miller said as they left the bank. "A man needs stability to run a successful ranch." The wedding itself was simple and brief, conducted in the small church with just the four of them present. Adelaide wore her best dress, a dark blue cotton that was respectable if not fancy, and Rowan had clearly made an effort, his hair combed and his shirt clean. When the pastor asked if they would honor and cherish each other, they both said yes in steady voices. When he pronounced them man and wife, Rowan leaned in and brushed his lips against Adelaide's cheek, a gesture so chaste and careful that it made her chest ache unexpectedly. They were married. For better or worse, richer or poorer, she was now Adelaide Sterling, wife to a young rancher in Colorado, bound by law and church to this life she had chosen in desperation and hope. Mrs. Patterson insisted on treating them to supper at the hotel restaurant, a surprisingly nice meal that Adelaide enjoyed, despite the awkwardness of being congratulated by strangers. Rowan seemed uncomfortable with the attention, but handled it with good grace, thanking people for their well wishes and introducing Adelaide as his wife without any hint of shame or regret. It was dark by the time they headed back to the ranch, the wagon rumbling through the night under a sky so full of stars that Adelaide found herself staring upward in wonder. She had forgotten how beautiful the night sky could be away from city lights. "Are you all right?" Rowan asked quietly. "Yes, just thinking about how strange life is. This morning I woke up alone and now I am married to a man I met yesterday. Regrets already?" "No, just observation." She glanced at him, his face barely visible in the starlight. "Are you all right?" "Nervous," he admitted. "I want to do right by you, Adelaide. I want this to work. But I keep thinking about all the ways I might fail." "Then let me tell you something I learned from my first marriage," Adelaide said. "The secret is not avoiding failure. The secret is deciding that you will keep trying even when you do fail. Thomas and I, we were not perfect. We argued about money and chores and all the little things married people argue about. But we kept talking, kept trying, and that made all the difference. Keep trying. I can do that." Rowan was quiet for a moment, then added, "I meant what I said yesterday, about wanting you to teach me, not just about running a household, but about everything, about being a man worth being married to. And I meant what I said about us teaching each other. You know things I do not, Rowan. You understand this land, these animals, this life. I may be older, but that does not make me wiser about everything." When they reached the ranch, Rowan helped Adelaide down from the wagon with a gentleness that was becoming familiar. Inside the house, they stood awkwardly in the parlor, neither quite sure how to proceed. "I put fresh sheets on my bed," Rowan said finally, his face flushing even in the dim lamplight. "I thought if you wanted we could share the room tonight, as husband and wife." "But there is no pressure, Adelaide. We can keep to separate rooms as long as you need." Adelaide considered this, her heart beating faster than she expected. She had been intimate with Thomas, but that had been years ago, and she had forgotten the vulnerability that came with sharing a bed with someone. But Rowan was her husband now, and she was practical enough to know that some things could not be avoided indefinitely. "We are married," she said quietly. "We should share a room. But Rowan, you need to understand that this is new for me too. My experience is limited to one man, and that was years ago. If you are looking for an expert teacher in this particular area, you will be disappointed. I am not looking for an expert. I am looking for patience while I learn." He moved closer, reaching out tentatively to take her hand. "We can go slow. Figure it out together." They went upstairs hand in hand, and Adelaide felt like a girl again, nervous and uncertain but also curious. Rowan had indeed made an effort with the room, the bed neatly made, a bowl and pitcher of water on the dresser for washing, even a vase with wildflowers on the windowsill. "Did you pick those?" she asked, touched by the gesture. "This afternoon, while you were talking to Mrs. Patterson. I wanted the room to be nice for you." "It is nice. Thank you." They prepared for bed with careful modesty, Rowan turning his back while Adelaide changed into her nightdress, Adelaide looking away while he removed his shirt and trousers. When they finally climbed into bed, lying side by side in the darkness, the space between them felt charged with possibility and fear in equal measure. "Adelaide," Rowan's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, can I hold you? Just hold you, nothing more. I just want to know what it feels like." She rolled toward him in answer, and his arms came around her carefully, as if she might break. Adelaide rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his skin through the thin fabric of his undershirt, hearing the rapid beat of his heart that matched her own. "This is nice," he murmured into her hair. "It is," she agreed, surprised to find she meant it. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two strangers who had promised to build a life together, taking their first tentative steps toward understanding what that might mean. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that Adelaide found surprisingly comfortable. She would wake before dawn to Rowan's touch, gentle and chaste, a kiss on her forehead or her shoulder, and then he would rise to begin his work while she started breakfast. They ate together, these early morning meals where they talked about the day ahead and the work that needed doing. Then Rowan would head out to tend the cattle and mend fence and do all the 1,000 tasks that running a ranch required, while Adelaide tackled the house. She threw herself into making the place a home with an energy she had not felt in years. The windows were washed until they gleamed, the floors scrubbed, the furniture rearranged to create a more welcoming space. She made curtains from the fabric she had bought, hanging them in the parlor and kitchen to soften the harsh sunlight. She organized the kitchen properly, went through Rowan's accounts and found several errors that were costing him money, planted a late vegetable garden in a sunny spot near the house. Rowan noticed every change, commenting on each improvement with genuine appreciation that made Adelaide feel valued in a way she had nearly forgotten. He started coming in for lunch, something he said he had never bothered with before, and these midday meals became Adelaide's favorite part of the day. Rowan would talk about what he had been doing, explaining the work in detail, asking her opinion on decisions he needed to make. She loved watching his face as he spoke, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about the land, the quiet pride he took in small accomplishments. "The fence in the north pasture is finally secure," he said one afternoon about a week after their wedding. "It took 3 tries, but I think it will hold now." "You should hire help," Adelaide said, not for the first time. "You cannot do everything yourself, Rowan." "I know, but I cannot afford it yet. Maybe after the cattle sale in September." "What if we could afford it sooner?" She had been thinking about this, working through the numbers. "I noticed you are selling eggs and butter in town below market price. If we increased our chicken flock and I made cheese as well, we could bring in more cash. I also saw that Mrs. Patterson at the general store sells simple dresses for a fortune. I could make them for half the cost and still make a profit." Rowan stared at her, and Adelaide worried she had overstepped, but then a slow smile spread across his face. "You have been here a week, and you have already figured out how to increase our income. I have been managing tight budgets for a long time. You learn to see opportunities." She hesitated, then added, "But only if you do not mind me working. Some men prefer their wives to focus solely on the house." "Adelaide, if you can bring in extra money with your sewing and cheese making, I would be grateful and proud. I told you I wanted a partner, and partners contribute however they can." He reached across the table and took her hand, a gesture that was becoming natural between them. "Teach me about managing money like you do. I want to understand." So she did. That evening, after supper, they sat at the table, and Adelaide showed him how she organized accounts, how she tracked expenses and income, how she identified waste and found savings. Rowan listened with fierce concentration, asking questions, making notes, his respect for her knowledge evident in every word. "My father was never good with numbers," he admitted. "He ran things by instinct, and often that instinct was wrong. I have been trying to do better, but I did not know where to start. Start with knowing exactly what you have and what you owe. Everything else builds from there." They worked until the lamp oil was low, heads bent together over the ledgers, and when they finally went upstairs to bed, Adelaide felt a sense of accomplishment that was deeply satisfying. This was what she had hoped for, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. In bed, Rowan pulled her close as had become their habit. They had not progressed beyond this gentle intimacy, both of them seemingly content to take things slowly, to build comfort before attempting anything more. But Adelaide could feel something shifting between them, a growing ease with physical proximity and increasing awareness of each other's bodies. "Adelaide," Rowan's voice rumbled in his chest beneath her ear. Thank you for today, for all of this. For making this place feel like a real home. You are welcome." She tilted her head up to look at him, barely able to make out his features in the darkness. "Thank you for listening to my ideas, for treating me like I have something valuable to contribute. You do. You have no idea how much." His hand came up to cup her face, and even though she could not see him clearly, she could feel his gaze on her. "I know we agreed this was a practical arrangement, but I need you to know that I am coming to care for you, Adelaide, not just as a partner, but as a person. You are remarkable." Her breath caught because she had not expected such honesty, such vulnerability. "I am coming to care for you too," she whispered, realizing as she said it that it was true. "You are a good man, Rowan Sterling, better than you know." He kissed her then, not the chaste pecks they had been exchanging, but a real kiss, his lips warm and slightly uncertain on hers. Adelaide responded without thinking, her hand coming up to rest on his neck, and for a long moment they explored this new intimacy, learning the taste and feel of each other. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Rowan rested his forehead against hers, his hand still cradling her face. Was that all right? More than all right. Adelaide's heart was racing, her body waking up to feelings she had thought long buried. "We can go slowly, Rowan, but we do not have to go so slowly that we are afraid to touch each other." "I am not afraid. I am just aware that you are precious, and I do not want to do anything wrong." "You are not doing anything wrong." She kissed him again to prove it, and this time there was more confidence, more heat. His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her closer, and Adelaide went willingly, amazed at how right it felt to be held like this, wanted like this. They kissed for a long time that night, exploring and learning, building the foundation for deeper intimacy. When they finally fell asleep, tangled together in a way that would have been shocking a week ago, Adelaide felt something she had not felt in years, genuine happiness. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity and growing affection. Adelaide increased their chicken flock, started making cheese, and set up a small sewing corner in the parlor where she worked on dresses for Mrs. Patterson to sell. Rowan mended what felt like miles of fence, worked with the cattle, and started implementing some of Adelaide's suggestions about ranch management. And through it all, they grew closer, their initial awkwardness giving way to genuine companionship. They talked constantly, sharing stories about their pasts, their hopes for the future, their fears and dreams. Adelaide learned that Rowan had been a lonely child, his mother having died when he was young, his father too grief-stricken to be fully present. He had grown up too fast, shouldering responsibility before he was ready, and the ranch was both his inheritance and his burden. "I used to resent it," he admitted one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "After Pa died, I would look at all this land and feel nothing but anger." "I was 22, Adelaide. My friends from school were traveling, seeing the world, living their lives, and I was stuck here trying to keep a failing ranch afloat. But you stayed." "I stayed because I did not know what else to do. It was the only home I had ever known, and I guess I thought I owed it to Pa to try." He turned to look at her, his brown eyes serious. "But now I am staying because I want to, because you have helped me see the possibilities instead of just the problems. You have made me remember why Pa loved this place so much. I am glad." Adelaide took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I spent so long just surviving, Rowan, moving from place to place, working whatever jobs I could find, never putting down roots because roots could be torn up. This is the first time since Thomas died that I feel like I am building something instead of just enduring." Their physical relationship deepened gradually, naturally, each step taken with mutual consent and growing confidence. Adelaide found herself awakening to a passion she had never fully experienced before. Thomas had been kind but unimaginative in bed, their coupling quick and functional. Rowan, despite his inexperience, was eager to learn and generous in his attention, and Adelaide discovered that desire did not diminish with age. It simply matured into something richer and more complex. "Tell me what you like," Rowan would whisper against her skin. "Teach me how to please you." And Adelaide would guide him, her initial embarrassment giving way to delight as she realized he genuinely wanted to learn, wanted to bring her pleasure as much as seek his own. They became lovers in the fullest sense, partners not just in work but in intimacy. And Adelaide found herself falling in love with her young husband in a way that was both surprising and inevitable. It was during one of their trips to town in early September that trouble first appeared. They were loading supplies into the wagon when a man approached, well-dressed and confident in a way that immediately set Adelaide on edge. Rowan's posture changed the moment he saw him, going rigid with tension. "Sterling," the man said, his smile not reaching his cold blue eyes. "I see you have acquired a wife. How surprising." "Mr. Hutchins." Rowan's voice was carefully neutral. "Adelaide, this is Gerald Hutchins. He owns the ranch to the north of ours." "Mrs. Sterling," Hutchins said, tipping his hat but looking at her with an assessment that made Adelaide feel like livestock being evaluated. "You are quite a bit older than I expected for young Rowan's bride. And you are quite a bit ruder than I expected for a neighboring rancher," Adelaide replied coolly. "Is there something you wanted, Mr. Hutchins, or are you simply here to insult strangers?" Hutchins laughed, though it sounded forced. "I like her, Sterling. She has spirit. But spirit will not pay your debts or keep your ranch afloat. My offer still stands. Sell me your land, take a fair price, and get out before you lose everything." "I am not selling," Rowan said firmly. "I have told you that multiple times. The bank will not wait forever." The bank and I have an understanding. Rowan finished loading the supplies and helped Adelaide up onto the wagon seat. Good day, Mr. Hutchins. As they pulled away, Adelaide could feel Hutchins watching them, and the prickling on the back of her neck told her this was not the last they would hear from him. Who is he really? A man who wants my water rights. Rowan's jaw was tight with anger. His ranch is much bigger than mine, but his water access is not reliable. My land includes a year-round creek and the best grazing for miles. He has been trying to buy me out since before Pa died. He started with fair offers, but lately he has been getting more aggressive. Aggressive how? Nothing I can prove. Fence cut in suspicious places. Cattle spooked in the middle of the night, little things that cost me time and money. Rowan glanced at her, worry clear on his face. I am sorry, Adelaide. I should have warned you about him before we married. Would it have changed my mind? I do not know. Maybe. Well, it would not have. I did not come here expecting everything to be easy, Rowan. Every place has its Gerald Hutchins, the bullies who think they can take what they want through intimidation. She squeezed his arm. But he does not know that he is not dealing with just you anymore. He is dealing with us, and we are stronger together. Rowan looked at her with such affection that Adelaide's heart swelled. How did I get so lucky? You wrote an honest advertisement and I was desperate enough to answer it, she said lightly, but then grew serious. We make our own luck, Rowan, by choosing each other every day, by working together, by refusing to give up. That is all we can do. The cattle sale later that month went better than expected. Rowan's small herd was healthy and well managed, and the prices were strong. After settling his most pressing debts, he had enough left over to hire 2 ranch hands for the fall work and buy Adelaide the better stove she had been wanting. It felt like a turning point, proof that their hard work was paying off, that they really could make this work. They celebrated with a rare dinner at the hotel restaurant in Leadville. Adelaide wearing the new dress Rowan had surprised her with, simple but well made in a deep green that brought out her eyes. She caught him watching her across the table with an expression of such open adoration that she blushed. What is it? You are beautiful, he said simply. I know I do not say it enough, but you are, and not just on the outside. You are beautiful in the way you think, the way you solve problems, the way you make everything better just by being there. Rowan Sterling, are you trying to charm me? Is it working? Very much. She reached across the table to take his hand. You are beautiful too, you know, inside and out. I watch you with the animals, the gentleness you show them, the patience. I watch you working yourself to exhaustion because you care so much about doing things right. I watch you growing into the man you were always meant to be, and I feel privileged to be part of that journey. You are not just part of it, Adelaide. You are the reason it is happening. His thumb stroked over her knuckles. Before you came, I was drowning. I did not realize it because I had no perspective, but I was failing at everything. You gave me hope. You gave me direction. You gave me a reason to believe the future could be better than the past. That night in their bed, they made love with a tenderness and passion that left them both breathless. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Adelaide felt a contentment so profound it almost frightened her. She had not thought she could feel this way again, had not dared to hope for it. I love you, Rowan murmured against her hair. I know we said this was practical, just an arrangement, but I love you, Adelaide. I cannot help it. Adelaide's eyes stung with unexpected tears. I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes. I love Thomas, but this is different, bigger somehow. Maybe because we chose each other as adults with our eyes open. Maybe because we built this together from nothing. I do not know. I just know that you have become the most important thing in my world. Good, he said fiercely, holding her tighter, because you are everything to me. Everything. Winter came early that year, snow falling in October and settling in for the long months ahead. Adelaide and Rowan spent the cold evenings by the fire, working on their various projects, talking, reading aloud to each other from the few books they owned. The ranch hands Rowan had hired proved reliable and hardworking, taking on much of the physical labor so Rowan could focus on management and planning. Adelaide's sewing business was thriving. Mrs. Patterson could barely keep up with demand for her dresses, and Adelaide found herself working late into the evenings to fill orders. The extra money was a blessing, allowing them to slowly build up a reserve fund and make improvements to the ranch. It was during one of these quiet evenings in November that Adelaide realized she had missed her monthly cycle. Then another month passed, and she knew. She waited another week to be certain before telling Rowan, nervous about how he would react despite their love for each other. She chose a quiet moment after dinner when they were sitting close together on the old sofa. "Rowan, I need to tell you something." He looked up from the book he was reading, immediately attentive to the serious tone in her voice. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. At least, I do not think it is wrong, but I do not know how you will feel about it." She took a breath, meeting his concerned gaze. "I am almost certain I am carrying your child." Rowan went very still, his expression shifting through several emotions too quickly for Adelaide to read. Fear clutched at her heart. They had never discussed children, had never talked about whether he wanted to be a father so young, whether she was being selfish by giving him this news when he already had so many responsibilities. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen, pure joy radiating from him. "Truly, we are going to have a baby." "Yes, I think so. I am fairly certain." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Adelaide. Oh, Adelaide, this is wonderful. I cannot believe it. A baby, our baby." Relief flooded through her, followed closely by happiness. "You are happy about this?" "Happy, I am overjoyed." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I know the timing is not ideal. We still have debts and the ranch is not secure yet. But Adelaide, a child, a family. That is what I have always wanted but never thought I would have. You have given me so much already and now this. You are not worried about the expense, the responsibility." "Of course I am worried. I am terrified, actually, but I am also happier than I have ever been." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to be parents. We are going to bring a child into this world and raise them with love and teach them everything we know." How could I be anything but grateful for that? They held each other for a long time, talking about the future, about names and possibilities, about how they would need to prepare. Adelaide felt something settle inside her, a piece she had not realized she was missing. She was 35 years old, married to a man 11 years younger, living on a struggling ranch in Colorado, and she was going to have a baby. It was not the life she had planned, but it was the life she had been given, and she could not imagine being happier anywhere else. The winter months passed slowly, but not unpleasantly. Adelaide's pregnancy progressed well, and Rowan became almost comically protective, constantly worrying about her doing too much work, insisting she rest, hovering until she finally had to sit him down and remind him that women had been having babies while doing physical labor since the beginning of time. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she said firmly but kindly. "I will be careful, I promise, but I cannot spend the next month sitting idle. I will go mad. I just want you and the baby to be safe. And we will be, but Rowan, you need to trust me to know my own limits." She took his face in her hands. "I understand you are afraid. I am afraid too, but fear cannot rule our lives." He learned to ease back on the hovering, though Adelaide caught him watching her with concerned eyes whenever she lifted anything heavier than a teacup. It was endearing, even when it was annoying, and she loved him all the more for caring so much. It was in February, during a brief thaw, that Gerald Hutchins made his next move. Rowan came home early one afternoon, his face tight with anger. "What happened?" Adelaide asked immediately. "Hutchins has filed a complaint about our water use, claiming we are diverting more than our share and affecting his downstream rights." Rowan paced the kitchen, his hands clenched into fists. "It is complete nonsense. We have legal water rights, properly filed and documented. But now I have to go before the territorial judge to defend them, which means time and money I do not have." "Do we have the proper documentation?" "Yes, Pa kept everything, but Hutchins has money for expensive lawyers and I have nothing but the truth." Adelaide thought quickly. "What about Miller at the bank? He seemed like a fair man when we married. Could he testify about your water rights, their legitimacy? Maybe. It is worth asking." Rowan stopped pacing and looked at her. "I am sorry, Adelaide. You should not have to deal with this, especially not now. We are partners, remember. Your problems are my problems." She went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head on his chest. "We will figure this out, Rowan. Together. We have come too far to let Gerald Hutchins take what we have built." The water rights hearing took place on a cold day in March. Adelaide, now visibly pregnant, sat in the courtroom beside Rowan, her hand firmly clasped in his. Hutchins had indeed brought an expensive lawyer from Denver, a smooth-talking man who argued that the Sterling Ranch was using water that rightfully belonged to downstream users. But Rowan had done his homework. With Adelaide's help, he had organized all of his documentation, had secured testimony from Miller and several other town residents about the legitimacy of his water claims, had even found the original surveyor who had mapped the water rights when the land was first settled. The judge, a weathered man who had spent his whole life in the territory, listened carefully to both sides. "Mr. Hutchins," the judge finally said, "I see no evidence that Mr. Sterling is exceeding his legal water allocation. His documentation is in order, his usage is consistent with his livestock needs, and multiple witnesses have testified to the legitimacy of his claims. Your complaint is dismissed." The relief that flooded through Adelaide was so intense she felt dizzy. Beside her, Rowan let out a long breath. But as they left the courthouse, Hutchins stepped in front of them, his face twisted with anger. "This is not over, Sterling. I will have that land one way or another." "Is that a threat, Mr. Hutchins?" Adelaide asked loudly, ensuring that several people nearby could hear. "Because we have witnesses here who just heard you threaten my husband." Hutchins looked around, realizing his mistake, and forced his expression into something resembling civility. "Of course not, Mrs. Sterling. Simply stating business realities. Good day." As he walked away, Rowan squeezed Adelaide's hand. "That was brilliant. Now everyone in town knows he is targeting us, which means he will have a harder time doing anything underhanded without people suspecting him." Adelaide looked up at her husband. "We may not have his money, but we have something more valuable. We have the respect of our community, and that counts for more than you might think." Spring arrived in a rush of green and new life. Adelaide's pregnancy was in its final months, and she had slowed down considerably, her belly large and her energy limited. Rowan had hired another hand to help with the spring work, and Adelaide spent her days preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes, and setting up the small room next to theirs as a nursery. Mrs. Patterson came out to visit regularly, bringing supplies and gossip and her experienced perspective as a mother of 5. She helped Adelaide understand what to expect during labor and recovery, information that was both reassuring and terrifying. "You will be fine," Mrs. Patterson assured her. You are healthy and strong. Just listen to your body and do not try to be brave about the pain. Scream if you need to. Nobody will judge you. The baby came in early May, on a morning that started with Adelaide's water breaking and progressed through hours of increasingly intense contractions. Rowan stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, looking progressively more terrified as her pain increased. "You should go," Adelaide gasped between contractions. "This is not something you need to see. I am not leaving you, not for anything." His face was pale but determined. "We are in this together, remember." The midwife, Mrs. Patterson, had brought arrived just as Adelaide felt the overwhelming urge to push. Everything became a blur of pain and pressure and encouragement from the women surrounding her. Rowan's steady presence at her shoulder, his voice telling her she was strong, she could do this. He loved her. And then, finally, the baby came into the world with a strong, angry cry. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant on Adelaide's chest. "You have a son." Adelaide looked down at the red, wrinkled little person in her arms and felt love unlike anything she had experienced before. This was her child, hers and Rowan's, created from their love and carried in hope. He was perfect. Beside her, Rowan was crying openly, his hand shaking as he reached out to touch their son's tiny fist. "Adelaide, look at him. He is beautiful. He is." She looked up at her husband, seeing wonder and love and awe written across his face. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but never settled on anything definite. Now Rowan looked at her with sudden certainty. "Thomas, if that is all right with you. I know he was your first husband, but I would like our son to carry that name, to honor the man who took care of you when I could not." Adelaide's eyes filled with tears. "That is perfect. Thomas Sterling. It is a good, strong name." The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, of learning to care for an infant, of watching Rowan transform into a father. He was endlessly patient with their son, walking him when he cried, changing his diapers without complaint, singing off key lullabies that somehow soothed the baby even if they made Adelaide laugh. "You are a natural at this," Adelaide told him one night as she watched him rock Thomas back to sleep. "I am terrified every moment that I will do something wrong," Rowan admitted. "But I love him so much, Adelaide. I did not know it was possible to love someone this much, this quickly. That is parenthood. All the love and all the fear mixed together, until you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins." As spring turned to summer, Adelaide recovered her strength, and the ranch continued to thrive. They had successfully defended their water rights, their herd was growing, Adelaide's sewing business was steady, and they had a healthy son. It felt like they had finally turned a corner, like the future was genuinely bright. It was in late July, on an ordinary evening, that everything changed. Rowan had ridden into town for supplies, leaving Adelaide at home with Thomas and the ranch hands. She was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard horses approaching fast, too fast for it to be Rowan coming home. She went to the window and felt her blood run cold. Gerald Hutchins was riding up to the house with 3 men she did not recognize, and none of them looked friendly. Adelaide quickly went to the nursery and picked up Thomas, then grabbed the rifle Rowan kept loaded near the door. She stepped out onto the porch as Hutchins dismounted, the rifle held in a way that made it clear she knew how to use it even if her hands were occupied with the baby. "Mr. Hutchins, I do not recall inviting you to my property." "Mrs. Sterling." His smile was cold. "I am here to make one final offer for your land. A generous offer. Take it, and you and your husband can leave with enough money to start over somewhere else. We are not interested in selling. We have told you that repeatedly." Then perhaps you need convincing that staying is not in your best interest. Hutchins nodded to his men, who started to dismount. Accidents happen on ranches all the time. Fires, injuries, all sorts of unfortunate events. Adelaide raised the rifle, pointing it directly at Hutchins. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. "You take one more step toward my house and I will shoot you. That is not a threat, Mr. Hutchins. That is a promise. I am protecting my home and my child, and the law will be on my side." From behind her, she heard the sound of the ranch hands emerging from the barn, their own rifles ready. "We heard everything, madam," called out Jake, the lead hand. "We all heard Mr. Hutchins threaten you. That is extortion and attempted arson at minimum." Hutchins looked around, realizing he was outmaneuvered and outnumbered. His face flushed with anger. "This is not finished." "Oh, I think it is." Adelaide's voice was hard. "Because you made your threats in front of witnesses, and we will be reporting this to the sheriff. If anything happens to our property or our family now, everyone will know exactly who was responsible. You have just made yourself the prime suspect for any crime that occurs on this ranch." Hutchins and his men mounted up and rode off, and Adelaide stood on the porch until they disappeared from sight. Only then did she allow herself to shake, the adrenaline that had kept her steady finally wearing off. Jake came up onto the porch, taking the rifle gently from her hands. "You did good, madam. That took real courage." "That took desperation and fear," Adelaide corrected, but she managed a smile. "Thank you for backing me up." When Rowan came home an hour later, the ranch hands were still on high alert, and Adelaide was sitting in the parlor nursing Thomas, trying to calm her racing heart. She told him everything, watching his face go white with fear and then red with anger. "He threatened you. He threatened our son." Rowan's voice shook. "I am going into town right now to file charges." "Already done. Jake rode in to tell the sheriff while you were on your way back." Adelaide adjusted Thomas at her breast. "Rowan, sit down. Getting angry is not going to help anything right now." He sat, but his body was rigid with tension. "I should have been here. I should have protected you. I protected us. I protected our family and our home, and I would do it again." She reached out to take his hand. "We knew Hutchins would not give up easily. But now he has shown his hand, made threats in front of witnesses. He has lost whatever respectability he had in this community. What if he comes back? What if he does not care about witnesses or consequences? Then we will deal with it, together, like we deal with everything." Adelaide squeezed his hand. "Rowan, look at me. We are stronger than he is because we have something worth fighting for. He only has greed. That makes all the difference." The sheriff came out the next day to take statements, and word of the incident spread through Leadville like wildfire. Public opinion turned decisively against Hutchins. Several other ranchers came forward with their own stories of intimidation and harassment. Within a week, there was talk of formal charges being brought, of Hutchins being investigated for multiple crimes. Hutchins left the territory before any charges could be filed, selling his ranch to a cattle company and disappearing without a word. The threat that had hung over Adelaide and Rowan for so long simply evaporated, leaving them free to focus on building their life without fear. The next few years passed in what Adelaide could only describe as contentment. Thomas grew from an infant into a lively toddler, curious about everything and endlessly energetic. Rowan proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful, always taking time to answer Thomas's endless questions and show him the workings of the ranch. Adelaide gave birth to a daughter in 1885, naming her Sarah after Rowan's mother. The little girl had her father's brown eyes and her mother's auburn hair, and she was calmer than her brother, content to sit and watch the world with serious attention. The ranch continued to prosper. With Hutchins gone, they were able to expand their herd, improve their facilities, and finally pay off all of their debts. Adelaide's sewing business remained steady, though she had less time for it with two small children. But the extra income still made a difference, allowing them to save for the children's futures and make long-term improvements. They hired more permanent help, good men who treated the ranch like their own and respected Adelaide and Rowan's partnership. The house was expanded to include a proper dining room and an additional bedroom for when the children got older. Adelaide planted a large garden and fruit trees, creating beauty along with practicality. But more than any material success, what Adelaide treasured most was the love she shared with Rowan. Their relationship had evolved from those uncertain first days into something deep and abiding. They were partners in every sense, lovers and friends and co-parents, each making the other stronger and better. "You remember when we first met?" Rowan asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the children finally asleep inside. "How awkward and uncertain everything was." "I remember thinking you were going to send me back to town immediately," Adelaide admitted with a laugh. "You looked so shocked when you realized how old I was." "I was shocked, but not disappointed, not really. Just scared that I would not be enough for you, that you would regret choosing me." He took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "I asked you to teach me about love, Adelaide. Do you remember?" "I remember. You said you wanted me to teach you about everything, about being a man worth being married to. And you did. You taught me that love is not grand gestures or perfect moments. It is showing up every day, choosing each other every day, working through problems together, building something that lasts." He turned to face her fully. "You taught me that age is just a number, that wisdom comes from experience, and that the best partnerships are between equals who respect each other." "You taught me things too," Adelaide said softly. "You taught me that it is never too late for a second chance, that hope is not foolish, that love can be found in the most unexpected places. You gave me a home, Rowan, not just this house, but a real home, a place where I belong. You gave me the same. Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me how to live, how to find joy in the daily work, how to dream about the future instead of just worrying about survival." He leaned in to kiss her, a gentle brush of lips that still sent warmth through her. "I love you, Adelaide Sterling, more now than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. And I love you, always." They sat together as the sky darkened and the stars came out, comfortable in their silence, secure in their love. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, and all around them lay the land they had fought for and built upon, the home they had created from nothing but hope and hard work. Adelaide thought about the woman who had stepped off that stagecoach in Leadville 5 years ago, desperate and tired and afraid to hope for anything better. She thought about the young man who had met her, scared and uncertain but brave enough to ask for help. They had both taken such a risk, trusting each other, choosing each other, building this life together. And it had been worth every moment of fear, every challenge overcome, every lesson learned. They had found love not despite their circumstances, but because of them. Two people who needed each other at exactly the right moment, who had the courage to build something beautiful from uncertain beginnings. As Rowan's arm came around her shoulders and she leaned into his warmth, Adelaide felt a peace so profound it made her eyes sting with grateful tears. She had been given a second chance at love, at life, at happiness. She had been given this man, these children, this home. She had been given everything she needed and more than she had ever dared to dream. "What are you thinking about?" Rowan asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Everything. How far we have come, how grateful I am." She looked up at him, seeing the boy he had been and the man he had become, loving both equally. "How lucky I am to have you. I am the lucky one. Maybe we are both lucky. Maybe that is the secret. Not that one of us is lucky to have the other, but that we are lucky to have found each other." "I like that." He pulled her closer. "Come on, let us go inside. Tomorrow is another day of work, but tonight I just want to hold my wife and count my blessings." They went inside together, hand in hand, pausing to check on their sleeping children before retiring to their own room. As Adelaide changed into her nightgown and Rowan removed his boots, she marveled at how routine and comfortable these domestic rituals had become. This was love, not the passionate whirlwind she had read about in novels, but something steadier and deeper, built on mutual respect and shared experiences and the choice to keep choosing each other. In bed, Rowan pulled her close and Adelaide rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not answered your advertisement?" she asked. "Sometimes. But then I remind myself that we did find each other, and that is what matters." His hand stroked through her hair, a soothing gesture that never failed to relax her. Everything that happened before, all the hardships and losses, they brought us to that moment. So I cannot regret them, even though they were painful. That is a generous way to look at it. It is the only way that makes sense. Otherwise, I would spend all my time wishing things had been different instead of being grateful for what we have. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I hope Thomas and Sarah grow up seeing what we have, understanding what a real partnership looks like. I hope they choose partners who respect them the way we respect each other. We will teach them, just like you asked me to teach you all those years ago. We will teach them about love, about work, about building a life worth living." Adelaide tilted her head up to kiss his jaw. "They are lucky to have you as a father, Rowan. I see you with them, the patience you show, the love. You are everything a father should be. I am trying. Sometimes I worry I am doing it all wrong. That worry is what makes you a good father. You care enough to question yourself, to want to do better." She settled back against him. "We are both doing the best we can, and that is enough." They talked until sleep claimed them, their voices growing slower and softer, words trailing off into comfortable silence. Adelaide's last conscious thought was how safe she felt here, in Rowan's arms, in this house they had made a home, in this life they had built together. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. There were hard seasons when the weather did not cooperate, when cattle prices dropped, when money was tight. There were illnesses and injuries, the normal trials of raising children and running a ranch. But through it all, Adelaide and Rowan faced everything together, their partnership only growing stronger with time. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did, already talking about taking over someday, about raising his own cattle and making the Sterling name mean something in the territory. Sarah was quieter but no less determined, showing an aptitude for numbers that reminded Adelaide of herself, already helping keep the household accounts by the time she was 8. In 1887, Adelaide gave birth to another son, whom they named James. He was a sunny-natured baby who grew into a cheerful toddler, bringing laughter into the household even during difficult times. Rowan joked that they were building their own crew of ranch hands, but Adelaide saw something more precious. They were building a family, creating a legacy of love and hard work that would outlast them both. The ranch became well known throughout the region for the quality of its cattle and the integrity of its owners. Rowan's reputation as a fair dealer and Adelaide's skill at management made them respected in the community. They were frequently asked for advice by younger couples starting out, and Adelaide always remembered to be honest about the challenges while encouraging about the possibilities. The secret, she would tell these young wives, is to never stop being partners. The moment you start thinking of your marriage as anything less than a team effort, that is when things start to fall apart. Respect each other, talk to each other, and never assume you know what the other person is thinking or feeling. It was advice born of experience, from those early uncertain days when she and Rowan had been little more than strangers, learning to trust each other one conversation at a time. They had built their love on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect, and that foundation had proven strong enough to support everything they had constructed upon it. As Adelaide approached her 40th birthday in 1889, she found herself reflecting on the past 6 years with something approaching awe. She had arrived in Leadville expecting nothing more than survival, a place to rest after years of drifting. Instead, she had found love, partnership, purpose, and a family she adored. She had found a home not just in the physical sense but in every way that mattered. Rowan, now 30 years old, had grown into his role as rancher and father with a confidence that made Adelaide proud. The uncertain young man who had met her at the stagecoach was gone, replaced by someone assured and capable, respected by his peers and loved by his family. And yet, he still looked at Adelaide with the same wonder he had shown in those early days, still told her regularly that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. "I mean it," he said one evening when she laughingly dismissed his latest declaration of love. "Adelaide, you saved me. Not just the ranch, but me. You took a confused boy and helped him become a man. You gave me everything I have. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but it would have taken years longer and I might have lost the ranch in the process. More importantly, I would not have had you beside me, and that is something I cannot even imagine now." He cupped her face in his work-roughened hands. "You are my partner, my love, my best friend. You are the reason I wake up grateful every morning. Do not diminish that." "All right," she whispered, touched by his intensity. "I will not diminish it. But you must know, Rowan, that you saved me too. I was lost when I came here, so tired of fighting, so ready to just give up. You gave me a reason to hope again, to believe that life could be good. You showed me what real love looks like. Not the fairy tale version, but the everyday, working kind of love that actually lasts. That is a gift beyond price." They kissed then, a kiss that held 6 years of shared history, of challenges overcome and joys celebrated, of a partnership that had exceeded both their expectations. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Should we renew our vows?" Rowan suggested suddenly. "Have a proper ceremony with the children present, with the whole town invited. Show everyone what we have built together." Adelaide considered this, then shook her head. "I do not need a ceremony to know we are committed to each other. I see that commitment every day in the way you work, the way you father our children, the way you look at me. That is more meaningful than any public declaration. You are right, as usual." He took her hand, lifting it to his lips. "But I do want to say this, Adelaide Sterling. I vow to keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life. I vow to keep learning from you, growing with you, building this life beside you. I vow to love you when it is easy and when it is hard, when we agree and when we disagree, until my last breath. That is my promise." "And I vow the same," Adelaide said, her voice thick with emotion. "To choose you, to love you, to stand beside you through everything life brings. From that first uncertain day to whatever comes next, I am yours and you are mine. That is my promise." They held each other as the evening darkened into night, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something lasting. The ranch was quiet around them, the children asleep, the animals settled, everything peaceful and right. In the years that followed, that peace would be tested occasionally by the normal challenges of life. There would be seasons of drought and seasons of plenty, times of worry and times of celebration. Thomas would eventually marry a neighboring rancher's daughter, taking over more of the daily operations of the ranch as Rowan gradually stepped back. Sarah would surprise everyone by wanting to become a teacher, leaving for college in Denver but always coming home for holidays, her sharp mind and generous heart making her students love her. James would prove to be the most adventurous of their children, talking about seeing the world beyond Colorado, though he always insisted he would come back eventually to help his brother run the family ranch. Adelaide and Rowan would become grandparents multiple times over, their house filling with the laughter of grandchildren during summers and holidays. They would watch the new century arrive, marveling at how much the world had changed since that day in 1883, when Adelaide had stepped off the stagecoach and met the young rancher who would become her everything. But through all of it, through every change and challenge and celebration, the foundation of their love would remain constant. They would continue to choose each other, day after day, year after year. They would continue to be partners in every sense, learning from each other, growing together, building a legacy that went far beyond the ranch itself. And on quiet evenings, sitting together on the porch they had rebuilt and expanded over the years, watching the sunset paint the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and purple, they would hold hands and count their blessings and remember that uncertain beginning that had led to this beautiful present. "I love you," Rowan would say, the words as fresh and genuine as the first time he had spoken them. "I love you too," Adelaide would reply, meaning it with her whole heart. It was not a fairy tale romance. It was better. It was real, built on respect and honesty and the daily choice to love each other. It was a partnership between a mail-order bride who had been older and wiser, and a young rancher who had asked her to teach him about love. Together, they had taught each other, learned together, grown together, and created something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. This was their story. This was their love, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.